Greetings, lords and ladies. There's been a bit of news that might have flown by your radar, and it's relatively important, all things considered, and that is news concerning The Witcher 4. Now, at the end of the day, this game probably won't be called The Witcher 4 for obvious reasons. It's just what we're calling it. It's meant as a placeholder, so we will refer to this game as The Witcher 4. The big piece of news here is that the next Witcher game might be out a lot sooner than we think, according to GameBrand and some other sources that are referred to, which I will be posting in the description. Essentially, the prophecy is that this game will actually release potentially in 2025, and that is a lot sooner than people thought. However, I would not be holding my breath. On top of that, there is news that major characters have already been voiced by relatively well-known voice actors, and this could be another indication that this game is relatively far along. Again, I will post the article in the description box if you want to read through it in its entirety. But here's a snippet from the actual article. Back in October 2022, CD Projekt Red said that The Witcher 4 was at least 3 years away from release, and given how two separate sources have now attached a tentative 2025 release window to the project, it appears that the work on the game has so far been progressing well and without major delays. Nearly half of CDPR's 1,200-strong staff has been working on Project Polaris, that's The Witcher 4 by the way, since late 2023, suggesting that the game has been in active production for a while now. Since AAA development cycles are at least 5 years long nowadays, it's plausible that the work on Witcher 4 started no later than late 2020, about a year and a half before the existence of Project Polaris was officially confirmed. But I think given that news, it's important to talk about what The Witcher 4 may or may not be potentially. Now, in terms of the protagonist, I think it's very likely that you're going to have a protagonist that you create yourself, just like in Cyberpunk, just like in a lot of games. Most AAA studios, when they make RPGs these days, are not going to create a fixed protagonist for a variety of reasons. One of them is so-called inclusion. People don't like not being able to create themselves. These are people usually obsessed with self-insertion. Another reason is just flexibility and options. And we don't really know what the story is about. Geralt very much was a character predicated on the books, so it makes sense that it was Geralt and nobody else. So probably a character that you make on your own. We don't even know if it will be a Witcher, although that's very likely. But I also want to talk about the elephant in the room, the classic elephant in the room, and that is the transformation of CD Projekt Red, at least to varying degrees. Now, a few years ago, CD Projekt Red came out talking about their dedication to the cause of ESG, so environment, social governance, and that is in many ways sometimes a red flag, because it shows an indication that a studio becomes more involved in and concerned about real-world politics than making good games. Do we know this definitively is the case with CD Projekt Red? No. But when you start bragging about this and showcasing videos about this, then you know that something might have changed at the core of CD Projekt Red's philosophy in terms of making games. We know historically that the Witcher games were very dark, gritty, and went for a tone that could be described as depressing even, and it was a world where a lot of suffering took place. Now, the point of an adverse, depressing environment like this, where everyone is suffering, is to give you a sense of just how bad things are for everybody. And this is a way in which you can create narratives where you can actually talk about issues that people nominally claim to care about. You know, when they attempt to insert real-world politics into games and fail at doing so. And I want to give you an example here of a particular scene, a small scene from the original Witcher 3 game, where you can see how some of these issues can be addressed in an appropriate way, and you let me know what you think. Without it being over the top, without it hitting you on the head.
Dieter.
You know him?
We served at the Lord's Manor together, where the Black Army's encamped now. He was a stable hand, I was the Lord's hunter. But that was before... well, a long time ago.
Before what?
Before they drove me from the village.
What did you do?
Nothing. I'm a freak. Sorry. I'd rather not talk about it.
I'm a freak too.
Aye, but of another kind.
If it's lycanthropy, I can help.
What?
Lycanthropy. Werewolves. Handled a few cases in the past. It's usually a simple curse that...
The Lord's son, Florian, and I, we loved each other. Dieter walked in on us in the stables. They drove me away. Florian hanged himself. Lord started drinking, and the estate fell into ruin. That's the long and short of it.
I'm sorry.
Ancient history now. I was to show you where I found an...
So this is a good example of what you can do if you actually want to talk about some of these issues in a subtle and interesting way that is integrated into the environment, the story, and the backdrop of the game itself without being obnoxious about it. I'm talking to you, Tosh. But my concern here is that we are going to lose some of this. We're going to lose the tone and the willingness to talk about things in a complex, subtle manner that is demonstrated in this scene, that again is woven into the greater backdrop of the game and the game world. Now, there are other things that I have concerns about that are probably not as important as this. That is the tone, the dark setting, the fact that it's meant to be an oppressive place where you really have to think about what's going on with people, because The Witcher 3 shows racism towards elves and sorcerers and sorceresses. It shows intolerance in the case of this gay man. It shows all kinds of these things without ever once becoming overtly political in a modern sense. So hopefully that doesn't happen. There are other concerns too. CD Projekt Red has greenlit a remaking of the original Witcher game, but it's not being made by CD Projekt Red, although they have greenlit it, and they've given permission to the studio to make it. The name of this studio is called Studio Fool's Theory. Kind of a weird name if you ask me. And they have promised in multiple interviews that they will be getting rid of so-called problematic elements in the original Witcher game, and this has become part and parcel of remakes in general, issues that are not issues that people want to get rid of because they think that the so-called modern audience can't handle it. It's very annoying. In this case, an obvious one would be the conquest cards. What are the conquest cards? Well, in the original Witcher game, when Geralt successfully copulates with one of the female characters in the game, he can get a card showing that he succeeded at this task. Now, is this sexist? I suppose it is. But again, this is reflective of a world that is gritty, brutal, where people are suffering. I think it's appropriate and fits in quite nicely, and it's part of the charm of the original game. And if we move on to The Witcher 4, another concern I have is something I've addressed before, and it's the uglification of women. I think that's something we need to be on the lookout for, because when you look at characters like Triss Merigold, or Yennefer, or Shani, these are very attractive women. And another sign, for example, that CD Projekt Red might be going the way of the dodo in this sense, is that the female characters are no longer appealing, they're no longer sexy or attractive, or that other elements go missing, such as the brothels in Witcher 3, which again, it's kind of sexist, I guess, but it's a brutal, dark, medieval fantasy world where bad things happen, and prostitution is probably one of the least of your concerns. But it fits the setting. And so these, among other concerns, are things that I think you could justifiably have about The Witcher 4. I'm still mildly optimistic about the game, to be perfectly honest, but I am a little bit worried about overzealous modern politics being inserted into the game and shoved down your throat, which is unfortunate because CD Projekt Red traditionally was not that type of studio. In fact, if I'm perfectly honest, there is another game on the distant horizon that I'm looking forward to a lot more than The Witcher 4, and that is Dawnwalker, made by Rebel Wolves. Now, this is a game that we know nothing about other than it's about vampires in a dark fantasy action RPG setting, which sounds cool on its own. There's a bit of art here and there, and I did make a video about the game talking about everything we know about this a while back. I will post a link to that video if you want to find out more about Dawnwalker and the studio Rebel Wolves, because the two people heading it are the two brothers that broke off from CD Projekt Red for a variety of reasons, and you could argue were responsible in the largest measure for making both The Witcher 3 really good, as well as Cyberpunk 2077. They're no longer there, they're heading their own project, and to be honest, given the fact that it's a game about vampires, which I think is very cool, something that we don't have enough of in the gaming world in my humble opinion, and the fact that they've shown no indications of becoming overtly political, My money is much more on Rebel Wolves at this stage than on CD Projekt Red. But at the end of the day, we'll have to wait and see. These are just some concerns I have. And regardless, if 2025 is a tentative release date, that means that within a year, maybe even less, we could be seeing the next Witcher game. And as always, thank you for tuning in. If you like my videos and my content, you can leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe. It's much appreciated, as it really helps out the channel. And I'll check you out next time. Take care.